podcast that connects the dots for business leaders to drive revenue through effective marketing strategy. We chat with marketing experts on different topics that will help you ramp up your revenue. We stream live on LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube, and you can listen to us on your favorite podcast platforms. Marketing Demystified, the podcast, is presented to you by GrowGetter, your partner in growth marketing. And here's today's episode.
Hello, everyone. Are you ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered with actionable tips that will transform your marketing game? You're in the right place. Welcome to Marketing Demystified. I'm your host, Jenn Mancusi, CEO and co-founder of GrowGetter, your growth marketing partner. So moving marketing from just happening to performing includes understanding what works and what doesn't. That's why we need marketing attribution, which I'm going to discuss today in our solo episode for the month. So just kind of start off by talking about what is marketing attribution, and in its simplest terms, it's really the practice of determining what's working and what's not when it comes to your marketing strategy. But how do you define working? That's going to be different for every business, honestly. Typically, when we're talking about an attribution model, we're thinking about how we're attributing revenue to a specific tactic or campaign. And that doesn't even need to be limited to marketing, but how are you attributing revenue to any source? Where is it coming from? Where is that revenue that you're generating coming from? So when we're talking about a marketing attribution model, we want to know what is driving revenue and what isn't. Now, one of the challenges with creating any kind of attribution model, but let's talk specifically about marketing. A marketing attribution model that is measured by revenue can be challenging, especially for businesses that have very long sales cycles. So if you have a 6, 9, 12, 18-month sales cycle for a large enterprise platform, or just anything that has one of those longer deal cycles, you can't wait 12 months or 18 months to figure out if something's working or not. So it's really important to identify other metrics that you could track along the way as leading indicators of success. So we could talk about what some of those metrics could be later on, because there's definitely a formula or an approach to take that's going to help you define the metrics that matter versus vanity metrics. That's one of the challenges with any sort of data-driven marketing approach, is knowing which metrics matter and which don't, because there's a million things you can track. So it's important to kind of cut through the clutter a little bit and just focus on the ones that really matter. So in terms of marketing attribution models, you've probably heard a lot of different terms out there for different types of attribution models. So one of them is first touch, one is last touch, multi-touch, and even within those three buckets, there's different models of those attribution models. There's a U-shaped model and an evenly distributed model. There's probably 12 out there, and maybe I can pull together a list for you all so you can see the different ways that you can measure attribution. But the difference is really how much weight are you going to put on a particular stage of the funnel. So if you're a business that feels like the most critical step is actually driving top of funnel and building awareness and getting people in at the top, then you probably want to employ a first touch attribution model. What that's going to do is tell you, where did that contact or that person, that prospect, come from first? So did you first meet them at an event, or did they fill out a form on your website? Did they, did you download them from some sort of list or something? If that's the most critical stage that's going to indicate whether or not you're going to get revenue from that person, then you might want to employ a first touch attribution model. It's a good way to make a decision on, do we need to continue doing X, Y, and Z thing? a lot of times, again, thinking about these longer sales cycles, you're going to want to be nurturing your prospects and your customers over a long period of time. So, if building up that initial database of prospects is most critical, that first touch attribution model will work really well. If you're really focused on conversion and what is the thing that actually drives someone from interest to making a decision, then a last touch attribution model might work really well. And you don't have to do one or the other. You can employ both and look at them for different reasons, which I will highly recommend. And I'll get into that in a second. But a last touch attribution model is going to help you identify what was the thing that sent them over the edge. So, if you are a business that is focused on product led growth and you are having people sign up to either a free trial or to actually purchase your product online, then what's the last thing that person did before they signed up? If you are more of an enterprise sale that has a sales team involved and people that are actually closing those deals, what is the last thing that person did before they requested a demo or a meeting with a salesperson? You're going to use that information for to make slightly different decisions than you would the first touch model. Now, the multi-touch model is like kind of the gold standard that is very difficult to do properly. There's a lot of different ways you can put a multi-touch attribution model in place. You can do a U-shaped model, which kind of weights the first and last touches more heavily than all of the touches in the middle. This works quite well if you have a lot of different touch points in between, a lot of content, a lot of non-converting events in between the sort of first discovery and that final conversion. An even distribution model will work better if you have fewer touch points. And that's going to help you kind of see like what are all of the different steps along the way that just got someone closer to converting with you. That U-shaped model is actually a quite nice blend of first and last touch because it kind of gives you some principles of both, but it also gives you some more information about the things that are important to happen in the middle. So as you're thinking about, you should be thinking about the attribution models layered on top of your customer journey. So if you don't already have your customer journey mapped out, this is a good thing to start with because you can then layer on the attribution model and make sure they're hitting all the touch points of those journey stages and converting along the way as you go. Now, I mean, this is an ideal scenario. This is a perfect ideal. A customer journey isn't always linear. It tends to be very bumpy and twisty and turny, and not everyone follows the same path. So you're trying to get as close as you can to ensure that you've got a data-driven approach to understanding if your marketing is working. That's the goal here. I have definitely been in a place where my goal was to get that multi-touch attribution model working to perfection with no errors and no missteps, and I think that obsession with perfection can actually set you back. So getting it close and really adopting a mindset of looking to the data to make your decisions is the goal here. And so sometimes a simpler model is actually better than a perfect model. But that's something that really depends on how much you're weighting the importance of your marketing spend and your efficiency in driving revenue. So that's a little bit of kind of like background on what is attribution, what are some of the different models, how to get started. This is maybe one of the I would say like start simple. Choose a first or last touch attribution model, one that's really easy to measure, and put that in place first before you try to get something too complicated. I think one of the things that's really critical for getting started with an attribution model is thinking about the input. the inputs are going to be critical in order to get the right output. So that means, are you going to be tracking? And, I wanted to kind of get into later on, like what systems are needed, but I think it's important now to talk about CRM. So if you have your CRM in place, that's really where all of your inputs need to happen in order to get the right attribution output. So if there are digital spaces that are not being tracked properly, or if there are offline spaces that aren't getting added into your CRM properly, then you're never quite going to get that attribution model right. So the input is really important. I would think about things like having some processes and naming conventions for things like UTM parameters. So for anybody not familiar with UTM parameters, that's how Google and your CRM and any other tracking software is going to learn where the clicks are coming from. So the source, the medium, and the campaign are the three most important. You can also add in things like content. And there's other variables that you can put in place, but these are all like kind of manual inputs. It requires someone to actually set them up. There are certain things that might get tracked automatically depending on your tech stack, but for the most part, you're going to need to indicate that you're putting a URL somewhere that has a specific source and a specific campaign associated with it. So having some rules around how you name them and how you create those tracking URLs will help with your attribution modeling. The more granular you get with the input, the more granular you can get with the output. That could be a double-edged sword, but it is the more data, the better, really. So you might want to be tracking the success of certain marketing campaigns on a channel level or on a campaign level. But if you can get right down to a keyword or to a specific link, then you're just going to have more information that you can go on to make some smart budgeting decisions when it comes to how to invest in marketing. So thinking about the inputs is important. Naming conventions is important. Where are you going to track all of this? Like that leads me into what systems you need in place for tracking it properly. So I already mentioned a CRM. I think one thing that is really important when thinking about CRM, and I think we talked about this when I had Scott Brinker on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, is that it's not just the platform for your marketing. It's not just the platform for you to manage deals and revenue. It's got to be everything. Your CRM should be the system of record that is tracking your end-to-end funnel. If it's not all connected up, then you're not really going to be able to attribute. So right now, if you are just using your CRM to send emails to your database, you're probably missing a trick, because making that connection with the revenue and the deals, the opportunities, the ones that are closed lost, the ones that are closed won, that's going to help you make better marketing decisions. Because just looking at things like how your campaigns are performing from a marketing metrics perspective is not going to help you with attribution. So for example, you could be focused on, bringing down your lead cost. Maybe you're currently spending, I'll just use round numbers for ease, $100 per lead, and you want to get that number down to $50 a lead. Well, that's actually quite easy to do if you just focus on reducing your lead cost and you're not actually thinking about lead quality. So a proper attribution model will force you to think about how that lead is going to perform at the end. You might actually be tolerant of a higher lead cost if it's going to drive more customers at a higher ACV. So those are some of the things to think about when you're putting all of this data into a CRM, is having those things in kind of separate places, the revenue and the marketing performance. That doesn't connect the dots together. You're not actually able to employ a working attribution model if you're tracking those things separately. So some other systems that you might need is any communication tools. If you're using email outside of a CRM, a lot of CRMs have email capabilities directly within them. But if you're using Google or Outlook or something like that, you want to make sure that it is connected with your CRM so you can track communications. Your actual platform, especially if you're, again, a product-led growth company, somebody who's actually allowing your customers to sign up in a DIY fashion. You want to make sure your platform is hooked up to your CRM, any accounting or finance systems, your billing systems, things like that, so that you can track, again, the revenue associated with the individuals that you have engaging with your marketing. So a question I get asked all the time, and I think there's a lot of controversial opinions out there about tracking and measuring marketing is, can everything be measured? And my personal belief is that yes, it can. Everything can be measured. Not everything can be measured quantitatively or in a very simple and easy manner, but everything can be measured. The most important thing is to make that decision on how you're going to measure it and what success looks like before you start. So this could be, some things are really simple. Like maybe the thing I want to measure is the open rate on my emails. That's easy. That's an easy metric to measure. And that's the ones that we tend to lean on because they're easy. Something that's a little bit harder is brand awareness, but there are ways to measure. And when you're looking at your marketing strategy on like a campaign level, you might say, this specific campaign, I'm going to determine if it's successful based on how many people like comment on it on social media, or I'm going to measure the success based on the buzz that I get at a conference hearing other people talk about it. Or you could just say this is going to be measured on gut feel, and that's okay as long as you've made that decision ahead of time. It's too often that we kind of say after the fact, that didn't work, that campaign didn't work, or that tactic didn't work, but we didn't define what it meant to work to begin with. So I think that's the most important thing. I think when thinking about brand awareness and intent, and some of the looser metrics or things that we want to measure, there's different things we can look at in terms of brand search and website traffic, direct traffic versus organic search traffic, followers and engagements on social media. So all of those things can be measured. It's just a matter of making that decision of what you're going to measure before you start. So I mentioned this earlier on in the episode, just about defining the metrics that matter and not measuring everything under the sun. If you've ever been in GA4, Google Analytics 4, or Google Ads or anywhere, and you look at the reports and the analytics, even your CRM, there's a lot of reports out of the box that have 1,001 metrics, and most of them you actually don't need. They're probably good to look at. It depends on, again, what stage of the funnel you're focused on, maybe improving conversion or improving experience in. That could be a decision, a factor in the decision making of what metrics matter to you in that moment. But really, it's about driving closer to conversion. So I mentioned lead cost earlier. That's a very common metric that people measure and try to optimize. Let's lower our lead cost. But actually, the opportunity cost and the customer acquisition cost, anything that gets you closer to the end of the funnel, is going to be a better metric to track. So if you can see that, this particular type of campaign, maybe your social advertising on LinkedIn is a very high lead cost. That's probably true. Anybody out there who's advertising on LinkedIn, your lead cost is probably quite high. However, your ability to target in that channel allows you to spend a little bit more on those leads if you're also measuring how they convert into opportunities or projects or bids or whatever you define that as in your business. Lots of acronyms out there, SALs and SQLs and SAOs and all those kinds of fun things. Which I won't define today. That's all probably unique to your business, but let's just talk about opportunities. If you have a channel that has a very high lead cost, but a low opportunity cost, then that's a more important metric to track and optimize than the lead cost itself. You could vice versa, have channels that have very low lead costs, but don't actually drive opportunities. If they're not driving opportunities, they're definitely not going to drive revenue. So there's your leading indicator that something's not working. And even though you are not spending a lot on the leads, it's the wrong leads. So that's why you want to, really evaluate all of the different conversion points in your funnel and be able to identify those metrics that matter. It's also important to not just think about the metrics that matter to you and your business, but also the metrics that matter to your customer. So this goes back to kind of tying in with your customer journey map, but looking at different milestones and journey stages that are important to your customer can really help to identify the KPIs that you want to measure within your business. So what I mean by that is, when somebody has experienced success in a particular journey stage, looking at it from the perspective of the customer, MQL, for example, that's not a data point or a KPI that your customer cares about. That is something that you care about. But if at that point, the customer experiencing success is they've found the answer to the question they've been searching for. They've been trying to solve this problem. They finally discovered the solution to it in a piece of content that you wrote. That's the success metric, is how many people discover the answer to their question at that moment in the journey. You might define that as an MQL, but understanding the metric that the customer cares about as well can help to actually just reframe your business into a more kind of customer-centric approach, so that everybody, sales, marketing, customer teams, finance teams, product teams, they're all thinking about how are we driving success for the customer, not just how are we driving success for us. That reframing and that thinking about it from the customer perspective can actually really help drive those business results. I'm a firm believer that if you create success for your prospects and your customers, it will create success for your business as a byproduct. If the goal is primarily and solely to drive success for the business, there will be missed opportunities. So that's one really great way to kind of reframe and think about how is the customer measuring success at this stage versus how are we? And then how do those things work together so that you know the metrics that you want to measure, and you also know what's driving success for your customers and prospects. So one other thing I think I forgot to mention when thinking about systems is actually any kind of BI tools that you might use. So this popped back in my mind as I was talking about, the reporting and the dashboarding and where you can find all of these metrics. Your CRM probably has a lot of out-of-the-box reports. They're probably like mediocre at best. They probably have a lot of good information about very specific metrics, but it's not going to be a complete picture because your business is unique and you've got a lot of different systems that are integrated together and working together in different ways. So those out of the box reports are only going to take you so far. Same with Google and any other products that you're using. So finding a business intelligence tool where you can link up all of your different data sources into one place. I think I'm probably preaching to the choir here in the insights space. That center of truth, that single source of truth for your data, is really important. So we like tools like Looker, which is a Google product, where you can use different connectors and connect up all of your different data sources, including things like Google Sheets or Excel docs, so that you can combine your goals with your actuals. That's a great place to do that. Power BI is a Microsoft version of that similar kind of BI tool. There's lots of others out there, Tableau and Domo and all types of others. So take a look at how you're actually reporting on this stuff, because I will say there's a huge, huge difference between being able to act on that data if it's always on and real time and you can tap into it at any point, versus if it needs to be pulled. If somebody has to generate a report or like go pull the metrics for XYZ, it's going to be outdated in 5 minutes. So creating a space where it's always up to date and always on, will allow you to react to it and act on it more quickly. So that kind of brings me to my last point on this. Once you have an attribution model in place, what do you do with it? What do you do with that data now that you have it all set up? Assuming that your inputs are going in there in a strong way, and you're getting the output that you're looking for in terms of what's working and what's not. Now you can start to make decisions on how you deploy your marketing resources. So that could be budgeting time. You need to create your 12-month budget. You can very easily look back and see, this worked really well for us, and this didn't work so well for us. So let's invest more in this one area than another. It also can really identify opportunities for improvement in your campaigns. So by tying your marketing strategy directly to revenue, if there's a campaign that feels really good and everybody really likes it, and it's just not performing, then there's opportunity to optimize and improve it. Having a data-driven approach can really help with that decision making, because it takes away the anecdotal kind of opinion-based decisions. So I have had that experience too, where I really liked something. I really liked the way it looked and the way it sounded and the way it felt, and it did not perform. Because we had a really tight attribution model in place, we knew it right away. We knew it almost immediately that it wasn't performing the way the thing we replaced it with was, and we were able to backtrack and then optimize. So having this sort of this really data-driven approach allows you to be really experimental and try different things and know really quickly what's not working, so that you can either optimize it or replace it with something that does. So using the data is really critical, and making sure you're looking at it on an ongoing basis to determine how you can drive more. It really helps to know what levers to pull as well. We've all been through those cycles in our business where, sometimes things are just cranking along and working really, really smoothly and really well and in a predictable way. And then sometimes something changes, something changes in the environment. We see layoffs in our industry, or the economy is suffering or something. And we need to know, like, what levers can we pull to make a change. And having those attribution models in place and having that data at your fingertips and accessible to everyone all the time can really help identify where you can make a small change or a big change to have shorter term or longer term impact, depending on what your needs are in the moment. The last thing I'll say is that I hear this a lot. I've heard it a lot over the last 9 months or so. There's marketing budgets are really getting hit hard. This happens often. It's an easy place to cut when you need to kind of slow down on your spending and get more efficient in a business. because a lot of times the spend isn't committed to, especially if you're thinking about advertising or something like that, where you can easily just turn it off. Having an attribution model in place that's measuring your performance can help you make sure that you're not 6 months later turning around and going, oh no, we shouldn't have cut that budget because that's actually where all of our revenue was coming from. So knowing that can help you make smarter decisions when it comes to getting more efficient with your budget, and actually cutting from areas that aren't driving revenue versus areas that are. So that's the kind of simple, high level, 10,000-foot view of marketing attribution. I'm so passionate about this topic because I think it just is such a critical foundation to creating marketing strategy that really works and performs in a predictable way. It's not easy. It's definitely hard to create these models and get them tracking properly, but just having an eye on that as a goal, and that desire to be a really data driven marketing team and function can have a lot of really powerful business impact down the road. So if anybody wants to give me a call and chat attribution, I will talk your ear off for hours. So reach out anytime. I hope we get to talk about this more. I'm sure we will. Thanks for listening in today. And I'm going to be back with another episode later this week, chatting with one of my favorites, Rand Fishkin from Spark Toro. And I will see you then.